Morning. It is April 25th. It's the fourth Sunday in April. My name is Doug Griffin. This is my Sunday school class, and we're in the book of Genesis. Okay, let me click on that. Here we are. When we last left our hero, Jacob, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Yes, he was on the run from his brother. He had tricked his father Isaac into giving him the birthright because he thought that's what he needed to do in order for God to bless him. But we don't have to trick people in order for God to bless us. He's going to just bless us because he's God. And he already has plans for us, so we don't have to force God's hand into doing certain things. He's way ahead of us. We can join in with him. We can praise him. We can say, Lord, is there something you want me to do? But we don't have to force God's hand. But that's what Jacob thought, because that's who he was when he was born. He came out grabbing onto his older brother's heel and no, I want to go first. I can't be second. And there's nothing wrong with being second. God has a plan for the second and the third and the fourth. God already has plans. But he thought, I've got to trick my father into making sure he blesses me so that I can make sure I get this blessing from God. And now Esau's ready to kill him, so he's on the run. If you remember, he had a dream while he's on the run, where he saw a ladder. Now here's what God is trying to change in his life. Jacob is like many of us who thinks that God is just watching from afar, and it's up to us. Everything is up to us. Get this done, get that done. In fact, our forefathers were into the rugged individualist, and you got to go out there and work. And there's nothing wrong with working. I'm not saying this, but that idea that you're on your own, it's up to you.
Make your own kind of music.
Yes, sing your own kind of song.
Yeah.
So, but we're not on our own. God is with us. And we still have like we use the phrase, the man upstairs, because we think he's upstairs. We don't know he's standing next to us. And we don't have to look up. We can look to the right. Hey, Jesus, help me on this. In fact, Jesus, what was your plan? I knew you already knew about this. You already knew this was going to happen. So tell me what the plan is, and I'll just get in line with your plan. But we don't look at it that way. We just think God is watching to see if we're going to mess up or not, or what we're going to do. And so Jacob is like, I'm on my own down here. God's way up there, and I'm just on my own. So he has this vision where he sees messengers of God that come down to earth, delivering God's will, and then going back up where our prayers are heard by him, right? So we're connected to him. He showed him, here's what's really going on, Jacob. I'm sending down my messengers to you. I'm involved in your life. And when you pray, it comes up to me. You're not on your own. And this was an image he had to break. This is an image he's trying to instill in Jacob and break that other image. And it takes time. Sometimes we can discover what the problem is. It still takes years to fix it. Just because oh, I know what the problem is. According to the Bible, it still takes years, unfortunately, to fix that, to change. So this was just the beginning of a change in Jacob so that he could understand that God is with him. So here's what God says to him at the end of Genesis chapter 28. And we're going to be in chapter 29 today. But he says, behold, I'm with you in Genesis 28:15. I'm with you, and I will keep you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I've done what I've spoken to you. And we need to all take that in. I'm not going to leave you until I've finished my plan in your life. So he didn't bring us this far to leave us. He didn't he didn't say, well, good luck. You're on your own now. See ya. Here's $5. Call me when you get there. He travels with us. He's with us every day. So he says, I will not leave you until I have finished what I have spoken to you. And so he's trying to instill that. Well, Jacob's answer was that to make a deal. In fact, I called this lesson today, let's make a deal. His answer says in verse 20, then Jacob made vows saying, if God will be with me and keep me in the way I'm going and give me bread to eat and clothing to put on so that I come back to my father's house in peace and not in pieces like Esau wants, then the Lord shall be my God. So he's kind of making a deal. Like, if you do what you said, then I will go ahead and worship you. And so Jacob's still feeling like he has to manipulate, and he's off, and I'll give you a tenth, like he has to manipulate God. And we do that. Lord, if you'll just answer this prayer, then I'll go to church every Wednesday. I mean, we bribe God. Like, God goes, oh man, that's a good deal. Okay, I'll do that because I really need you to go to church every Wednesday because I was lacking that in my life. So we think we can offer something to God to make him do stuff. We make all these promises to God because we have to do that with human people. Now, there's some human people we don't have to do that with. They're just like, no, here, I'm just giving this to you. No, but I've got to pay you. No, you don't. I'm really just giving this to you. And that's who God is. There aren't conditions under love. Well, I'll love you as long as you live right. He's like, nope. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. He loved us. It wasn't based on anything we've done or anything that we're going to do. So, but Jacob's like, I got to make this deal with God and convince him to go ahead and do what he has to do. And that sort of attitude is going to be broken over a series of years. This is what God does to all of us. We all have things in our life that we are misunderstanding God because we think he's like the adults or the people in our life that we've run into. We think God is impatient, or we think God is always angry, or we think God is forgetful. We got to remind him of stuff, or and so we because there were people we ran into in our lives when we were young that were like that, and so Jacob had this brother that was obtuse, and he would make deals with him. Hey, I'll trade you this porridge for your birthright. So he's just used to making deals with people. You think that's how you get your way. So I got to make a deal with God. So if God, you really do everything you said, I will give you a tenth of everything. And like God's going, okay, deal, man, I'm going to get a tenth of everything you got. That's okay. I wasn't going to do it before, but now I am. Not knowing, like, dude, I've seen the end of your life. I already know what's going to happen with you. You don't have to talk me into it. He wants us just to believe him and trust him. Okay, so now we're in chapter 29 of Genesis. And I again want to set the scene for Jacob. Jacob had never been outside of Beersheba. That's where he was born. Once his father Isaac had moved back there. Esau had traveled all over. Esau loved to go hunting and go traveling. He met some Canaanite women and some Ishmaelite women and married them because he was always going out and doing stuff. You notice that Jacob was not married. Jacob lived in his mama's tent, the Bible says, and that's where he spent most of his time. He'd never been away from home. So a couple things are going on. He's pretty sure his brother's going to kill him, and his father Esau is sending him out. Get out of here, because he's sure he's going to kill him, even though Jacob has never left home. You bet. As soon as I'm dead, not knowing he wasn't going to die for 40 more years. As soon as I'm dead, this man's going to kill you, so you better go. So he is scared to death. Jacob, behind him is a brother, and as far as he knows, his father might have dropped dead as soon as he left. So Esau may be on the way looking for him. He doesn't know, and that vision of Esau will haunt him for the next 20 years. In fact, the next time he's about to run into Esau, he's like, oh, this man's going to kill me. He's just sure daddy's dead. Esau's behind him, chasing him, going to kill him. And in front of him are these evil Canaanite people that he was told to avoid his whole life. And he doesn't, he's by himself. There are no servants with him. There are nothing. He's just by himself and scared to death. So he's traveling. God has said, I will be with you. It's like, okay, God, if you really do it, I'll pay you back. So he's traveling. I will tell you that the place, Bethel, where he got to was about 35 miles from where he was. He went 35 miles in one day. So because he was that scared. So let's assume that he went 30 miles a day, because where he ended up in Turkey, so he went all the way through present-day Israel and up into the Turkey-Syria area, was 450 miles away. So if he went 30 miles a day, it took him 15 days to get there. So for 15 days, he is traveling by himself, never know who he's going to go run into, never knowing Esau's going to catch up with him, scared. we have to understand his mindset. Okay, so Genesis chapter 29, verse 1 says, so Jacob went on his journey, scared, and came to the land of the people of the east. So he's finally, now here's funny, this phrase people of the east usually refers to Saudi Arabia. The other times you see it in the Bible, it refers to the Ishmaelites who were living in Saudi Arabia, who's directly east of Israel. But Syria is north and east. So he's calling them the people of the east. And he looked and he saw a well in the field, and behold, there were 3 flocks of sheep lying by it. For out of that well, they watered the flocks. So there's 3 different, you can tell there are 3 separate flocks waiting by this well. And a large stone was on the well's mouth. Verse 3. Now all the flocks would be gathered there, and they would roll the stone from the well's mouth. Well, I sound like I said whales. The well's mouth. Water the kind back on live. So I don't remember where I left off. So I'm going to start again at the top of Genesis chapter 29, right? So Jacob went on his journey. He's traveling. He's never been any of these places before. He's never left home before. And he finally gets to the people of the east. He's gone about 450 miles, which we think took him about, I sit with all the scholars and we all talk, which the scholars think it took about 2 weeks if he went about 30 miles a day. And he had nothing else to do. So I'm sure he went 30 miles a day. So Jacob went on his journey. He came to the land of the people of the east in 29:2, and he looked and saw a well in the field. And behold, there were 3 flocks of sheep lying by it. For out of that well, they watered the flocks. A large stone was on the well's mouth, and now all the flocks would be gathered there, and they would roll the stone from the well's mouth, water the sheep, and put the stone back in its place on the well's mouth. And I was saying that this is an unusual thing to see these people working together. In Genesis chapter 1, verse 25, it says, then Abraham rebuked Abimelech because of a well of water which Abimelech's servants had seized. So Abraham had dug a well, and then Abimelech's servants had seized it. And Abraham's living in Beersheba. And he said, you will take these 7 ewe lambs from my hand, that they may be my witness that I have dug this well. Called the place Beersheba, because the 2 of them swore an oath there. So this is Beersheba, where Isaac was born. Well, and Sheba means 7 or covenant. Then you see in Genesis chapter 25, verse 15, now the Philistines had stopped up all the wells which his father's servants had dug in the days of Abraham his father, and they had filled them with earth. So by the time that Isaac got back there years later, maybe 75 years later, it says that the Philistines, they didn't want Abraham to come back there. So it says welcome back. Okay, so they had dug all these wells, right? And then filled up all of Abraham's wells. And verse 18, it says, and Isaac dug again the wells of the father, which they had dug in the days of Abraham his father. For the Philistines had stopped them up after the death of Abraham, and he called them by the names which his father had called them. So his fathers had called them names like peace and Trinity. Not Trinity, he didn't know what that was. But nice names. But then it says, but the herdsmen of Gerar quarreled with Isaac's herdsmen, saying, this water is ours. And they fought them and drove them off. So he started calling these wells conflict and anger, and just because he wasn't happy that his father had, which is significant. It says, then they dug another well and they quarreled over that one also. So then he went up from there to Beersheba. And that's when he finally was able to dig a well, and he just began to live in Beersheba. This is where Jacob and Esau were born, right? So they're born in Beersheba, and they are, so Isaac has these twins, and he's thinking to himself, wow, I had such a hard time, and the Philistines drove me out. And so of my 2 sons, I can tell one of them is soft and one of them is hard. I can tell one of them is a mama's boy and one of them is right. So I'm sure what God meant was this one, Esau, the oldest son, because Abraham, my father, had to fight, and that's how he got. So how could God possibly use the soft one? That doesn't make any sense, which is indicative of how we think. We think that God sees life how we see it. Yeah. So So we see a project and we determine in advance who God would have to use in order to make that project happen. And God never does it the way we think it should be done. He always God on purpose. He says he uses the foolish to confound the wise on purpose, so that we know that it's him. The project is being accomplished because of God, not because of who we think should be able to do it. But he's looking at Esau saying, this has got to be the heir because you got to be able to fight off the Philistines. You got to fight off the Canaanites. So that's why he was trying to force God to bless Canaan, Esau. But God going to do what he want to do. So anyway, Jacob gets there. He's in Syria now, back at least just in the country. But he doesn't have any idea. There were no maps, no Thomas guides. Ooh, remember that? No GPS, nothing. He doesn't know where to go. And it's hard to give directions. Well, when you get there at the third mountain, turn left at the fourth cactus. So he's just there. And so in verse 4, it says, and Jacob said to them, my brother, where are you from? And they said, we're from Haran. He goes, oh, wow, okay. At least I know I'm near Haran. Now they're in a field. They're not in the city of Haran, but at least, okay, I must be near it. And then he said to them, do you know Laban, the son of Nahor? And they said, oh, yeah, we know him. He's like, oh, okay, this is amazing. I can't believe I ran into the right people. Now, I want to stop here at the word son of Nahor. Laban was not the son of Nahor. Laban was the grandson. Laban was the grandson of Nahor. It was Nahor, Bethuel, then Laban. But they use the word son here, and it's interchangeable with grandson, because in their minds, son, grandson, it's the same thing. So they use the same word for both. And here I'm going to give you an example of that. But like my nephews are really my grandnephews, but I just say nephews. They just call me uncle. They don't call me grand uncle. They use the word uncle. Their kids, when they have kids, and they shouldn't have any time soon, but when they have kids and I'm their great uncle, they'll just call me uncle. They'll, and you do that in some families. So here they just use the word son. That means son, grandson. For example, in Genesis chapter 9, verse 24, it says, so Noah awoke from his wine and knew what his younger son had done to him. This word son can also be translated grandson. It says younger son. And literally, it says youngest son. That would be Japheth. Japheth was his youngest son. So, and Ham wasn't his youngest son. But that word son should be translated grandson. Why do we know that? Because the very next sentence says, then he said, cursed be Canaan. Well, Canaan was his youngest grandson. So it says he knew what was done, and he immediately said, cursed be Canaan. That's the first words out of his mouth. So he knew that it was Canaan, his youngest grandson, but the translators translated it son. But I'm saying that word can be translated either way. And cursed be Canaan. Yeah, servants and servants he shall be to his brethren. What? But people really insist that this was Ham, and Ham did it, and Canaan the curse was passed down to Canaan. And why specifically Canaan? Ham had a bunch of kids, Cush and Egypt. There's a kid named Egypt, and all these were his different sons. Why is Canaan only being? And Canaan's the youngest, so why is he being cursed? In Ezekiel 18, verse 19 through 20, it says, "Yet you say, why should the son not bear the guilt of the father? Well, because the son has done what is lawful and right, and has kept all my statutes and observed them. He shall surely live. The soul who sins shall die. The son shall not bear the guilt of the father." So the curse doesn't get passed on to the son because of what the father did. The son shall not bear the guilt of the father. If the father did something, the son doesn't. You're not cursed because of what your father did. The soul that sins shall die. What you did, you get paid back for. You don't get. God doesn't. Well, they sinned, so I'm going to judge you. Like what? What? How did I get in this? He says, nor the father bear the guilt of the son. It doesn't go the other way. Well, the son sinned, so God's going to punish. He says, the righteousness of the righteous shall be upon himself, and the wickedness of the wicked shall be upon himself. So Canaan didn't get cursed because of what Ham did. Canaan did it. So even though it says son, that word should be grandson. And that's the same thing was going here. Do you know Laban, the son of Nahor? That should be translated grandson. And they said, oh, we know him. So back to verse, I'm verse 6. So he said to them, is he well? And they said, he is well. Because they don't even know, he may be dead. He's not literally saying, oh, how's he feeling? Like, is he alive? Because I am here in Syria. We haven't heard from them in a long time. They could be dead. And I am by myself in a strange land with people that I'm scared of. Right. Right. And they said, he is well. And in fact, they said, look, his daughter Rachel is coming with the sheep. And so way in the distance, right, you can see a big herd of sheep coming. Now, this is not the same well where Rebekah met Isaac's servant years earlier. In Genesis chapter 24, verse 11, it said, and he made his camels kneel down. And this is Abraham's servant, Eliezer, who showed up with a bunch of camels and a bunch of gifts. He says he made them lie down outside the city by a well of water at evening time, the time when women go out to draw water. So he was right outside the city. There's a well that was right outside the city. They're in a field way away from the city. He didn't know where he went. Like, where are you from? We're from Haran, and it's way over there, you know. So she's coming with her flock, but this is a different well. And someone had talked them into all waiting on her. I wonder who might have done that. Okay, so then he said, look, it's still high day. It is not time for the cattle to be gathered together, which means at the end of the day, you would gather all your camels together and put them to bed, right? I mean, all your cattle. He says, water the sheep and go and feed them. So he's trying to get rid of them because that's who Jacob is. Oh, Rachel's coming? Why don't you guys get out of here? You know, take the stone away, drink your fire, and go, because I don't want any. He's afraid that they're going to influence Rachel and they're going to see me talk to her and they're going to say something, because they know that the things that God has set in motion, no man can break them asunder, right? So he's trying to get rid of them, but they said, we cannot until all the flocks are gathered together and they have rolled the stone from the well's mouth. Then we water the sheep. So we made a deal. Somebody's daddy, probably Rachel's daddy, probably Laban. He's a good deal maker too. In fact, Jacob met his match when he runs into Laban as far as making deals. So he says, I am going to, we have to all wait for her. We made a deal. Okay. And again, this whole deal making thing is just so unusual. It's just so unusual. For example, in Exodus chapter 2, it says, now it came to pass in those days when Moses was grown, Exodus 2, chapter 11, that he went out to his brethren and looked at their burdens. So Moses is in Egypt, but he's a prince of Egypt right now. He'd been adopted into Pharaoh's family, and he discovered that he was Jewish. Like, surprise, I'm not Egyptian. So he's going out and he's looking at his brothers and all their burdens. And he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his brethren. Like, oh my God. So he looked this way and that way. And when he saw no one, he killed the Egyptian and hit him in the. I'm supposed to deliver my people, so I'm going to kill this Egyptian. And I guess just one by one, he was just going to kill all the Egyptians one at a time, I guess. That was not a good plan. And he hid this one in the sand. And when he went out on the second day, just the very next day, behold, two Hebrew men were fighting. And he said to one who did the wrong, why are you striking your companion? Then he said, who made you a prince and a judge over us? Which is interesting prophetically. Who made you a prince and a judge? Well, God had actually made him a prince and a judge over them, ironically. But who are you to tell me what to do? Sometimes when you say that to people, you're wrong. Somebody did. God told them to tell you what to do. So do you intend to kill me as you killed the Egyptian? So Moses is horrified because apparently God had blown the sands off his Egyptians, which he will do. God will blow the sand off your Egyptian. You can try to hide your stuff. And God's like, no. Everything that was hidden will be coming into the light. So he will blow the sand off your Egyptian when you're doing wrong, because you need to face it. Okay, surely this thing is known, Moses said. He said, oh my God, surely this thing is known. And when Pharaoh heard of this matter, he sought to kill Moses. But Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh, and he dwelt in the land of Midian. Who are the Midianites? Those are Abraham's kids through Keturah, his other wife. Keturah had 6 kids, and one of them, his name was Midian, and these are the Midianites. So they're relatives of the Jews, right? He had Abraham had kids through Isaac and Sarah. He also had kids through Keturah. So he went, I'm going to go live with my relatives over where the Midianites are. And he dwelt in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. Now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came and they drew near and they filled their troughs, father's flock. So they take the water out of the well and they fill these troughs and they bring their sheep up and they start to drink, it says. And then the shepherds came and drove them away. But Moses stood up and helped them, and he watered their flock. So Moses, who's a very fierce person, drove all of them away. But that was normal. Like, if you do all the work and you fill the troughs and you bring your sheep up, I'll just come and attack you, and then bring my sheep down, and we'll drink out of the trough. So that was normal practice. Wells were very treacherous times. So for them to all be cooperating and waiting for Rachel, in my imagination, the Bible doesn't say this, but I think Laban talked them into this. Laban, Rachel's father, probably talked them into this. And so they're waiting, like, we can't leave until she gets here, and then we all water our flocks together. So it says, now while he was speaking with them, back to Genesis chapter 25, verse 9, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess, and it came to pass when Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, that Jacob went and rolled the stone from the well's mouth and watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother. He did not even wait for anybody else to do it. He was so anxious that he rolled the stone away by himself. He watered the flocks. He did it all. It says, then Jacob kissed Rachel and lifted up his voice and he wept. Why did he cry? Because Jacob thought he was on his own. He thought he was on his own. That's how he lived his life. I've got to trick my brother into giving me this, and I've got to trick my father into giving. He just thought, it's all on me. It's all on me. And to see that God had led him so easily, it just led him to the right people and the right place. And here I made it, and I didn't die, and I'm in Syria. And look, there's Rachel just showed up, and he started crying because he could not believe that it had been so easy. Now, here's what's interesting in Psalm 32, verse 8. It says, I will instruct you and teach you in the way you should go. I will guide you with my eye. Now, God said, I don't know if you had a good relationship with a parent or a teacher where they would just give you that look and you'd know to shut up. They didn't have to say a lot. They just, okay. Or they'd look at you and say, go over there, and they didn't have to say anything. You had that kind of relationship. Or you may have a relationship with somebody where something stupid happens and you just look at each other and start laughing. And you don't have to, no words. Just, he says, I'll guide you with my eye. He says, do not be like the horse or like the mule, which has no understanding, which must be harnessed with bit and bridle, else they will not come near you. So you have to put a bridle on you, because the horse and the mule don't know where you're going, they don't understand. You can say, well, I'm going to go down to the store first. I'm going to go pick up a couple of, they're like, what? They don't know what you're talking about. So you have to put a harness on them and pull them over. Don't be like that, where I have to put a harness on you, God's saying, and force you to go where you're supposed to do. Just let me guide you with my eye. He says, many sorrows shall be to the wicked, but he who trusts in the Lord, mercy shall surround him. So if you're just letting God guide you and God lead you, mercy just surrounds you. You just end up in the right place at the right time. You just end up talking to the right person, meeting, because you're just trusting in God. You're listening to his voice, and he doesn't have to harness you to force you into some place. You're just putting your life in his hands, and you'll have all these coincidences where you're like, isn't that amazing? I just happened to run into this person, or just happened to, it's not, you didn't just happen to. God's working, God's doing it, God's moving in your life, and all things are working out. So it says, so that's why he wept, because he can't believe he had never been away from home. He had never been on his own, and yet he ended up exactly in the place he was supposed to be. And Jacob told Rachel that he was her father's relative. Okay, this word relative is sometimes that translated brother, sometimes that translated cousin. And he that was Rebekah's son. So he's basically saying, I'm Rebekah's son. Like, I'm your cousin, I'm your relative, I'm your brother. The Bible translates this all different ways. It depends on the translator, how they translate a certain word. But we have to understand that, and we can look for context to see what it's talking about. So she ran and told her father. Now, I'm just going to give you this last bit of context. Brother, relative, that word relative that sometimes uses cousin, uses brother. In Matthew 13, chapter 55, it says, is this not the carpenter's son? Is not his mother called Mary? We're talking about Jesus, right? And his brothers are James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas. So people are going, oh, Jesus had 4 brothers. Well, they're actually his cousins. This word brothers could be translated relatives, could be translated cousins, could be translated any number of ways, because in their mind, if we're related, we're related. I'm your cousin, your uncle, we're related. And so the translator translated it brothers, but they're really his stepbrothers. I'm calling his father's, well, his cousins, his father's brothers' kids who were adopted into the family. They're not his literal cousins. Here's one way we know this. I mean, his little brothers. In John 19, verse 25, it says, now there stood by the cross of Jesus his mother's sister, who is Mary, the wife of Cleopas. Another name for Cleopas is Alphaeus. Sometimes that word is translated Cleopas, sometimes translated Alphaeus, depending on the Aramaic and the Greek and all that stuff like that. So you've got his mother, Mary, his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Cleopas, and Mary Magdalene. So there's 3 Marys all standing next to each other. In Israel at this time, 1 out of every 4 women was named Mary. It was just a very common name. Like today, 1 out of every 4 black women is named LaShontra Chica. No, I'm kidding. But so it was just Mary was a common name. So when Jesus therefore saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing by, so he's looking at his mother and he's looking at his John, right? He said to his mother, woman, behold your son. Then he said to the disciple, behold your mother. And from that hour, that disciple took her to his home. Now, he did that because he's dying and he has no brothers. According to Jewish law, the next in line brother would take the mother into his home. But Jesus didn't have any brothers. That's why he said, John is now going to be your son. Okay, and that disciple took her into his home. In Matthew chapter 27, verse 55, it says, many women who followed Jesus from Galilee ministering to him were there looking on from afar. So they're watching the crucifixion. Among them were Mary Magdalene, Mary, who's the mother of James and Joseph. Now remember, James and Joseph were 2 of Jesus's brothers, but really they were his cousins. So Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of Zebedee's sons. Zebedee's sons are James and John. We read about them all the time. They're the 2. In fact, that James is called James the Greater, and this James is called James the Lesser. In Luke chapter 6, verse 13, it says, and when it was day, he called his disciples to himself, and from there he chose 12, whom he also named apostles. Simon, who's also named Peter, and Andrew, his and Andrew are brothers. James and John, those are the sons of Zebedee, their brothers. Philip and Bartholomew. Then there's Matthew and Thomas. Then there's James, the son of Alphaeus, which also would be Cleopas. So James, the son of Cleopas, right? And Simon, called the Zealot. So there's James and Simon, their brothers. And then Judas, it says the son of James, but that word son of is not even there. It literally doesn't exist. It says Judas of James, meaning he's connected, meaning he's his brother. But I don't know why they just put in the son, and there's not even a word there. So he's saying there's James of Alphaeus, Simon, his brother, and Judas, who's of James. They're all 3 brothers. These are the 3 brothers of Jesus, except they're not his brothers, they're his cousins. They're Alphaeus' son. They're not his father's sons. It says, and then there's Judas Iscariot, who also became a traitor. Now, the same Judas, who is of James, or related to James, wrote the book of Jude. Jude was just, and he stopped calling himself Judas once the name Judas had a bad connotation. Just call me Jude. And in Jude 1:1, he says, Jude, I'm a bondservant of Jesus Christ, and I'm the brother of James. So he was the brother of James. So this word brother can be translated relative or cousin. Anyway, so so Jacob is saying to Rachel, I'm your cousin. I'm related to you. We are relatives. It says, and then it came to pass when Laban heard the report about Jacob, his sister's son, that he ran to meet him and embraced him and kissed him and brought him to his house. Now, here's where Jacob messed up. If you remember Eliezer, before he went into Laban's house and had dinner with him, he said, wait, let me tell you all the rules first and why I'm here. Because once I get into your house, I'm under your roof and your rules. But Jacob doesn't know anything. So okay, let's go, Laban. And says, anybody, I love it, says, so he told Laban all these things. That's what the next verse is. So he told Laban all these things. I'm pretty sure he didn't say, I tricked my daddy and my brother Esau's about to kill me. All he did was say, hey, I came from home and here's what happened and I saw Rachel and right. He didn't tell them the whole story. And Laban said to him, surely you are bone and my flesh. And he stayed with him for a month. Then Laban said to Jacob, because you are my relative, my brother, sometimes, but again, my cousin, and they were cousins. They were second cousins, or were they first cousins? Their grandfathers are brothers, and then their kids are cousins. Yeah, they're second cousins. Okay, so because you are my relative, because they didn't have a word for second cousins, should you therefore serve me for nothing? Like you've been working for a month, and he says, tell me, what should you? Because he's seeing how he's looking at Rachel. Right? He's not stupid. Now, Laban had two daughters. The name of the elder was Leah. The name of the younger was Rachel. And Leah's eyes were delicate, it says. Now, that was a sign of beauty in that part of the Middle East in that day was your eyes. Right. And it's eyes today, but we look at in some cultures it's hair, and some cultures it's how thin you are, in some cultures it's how meaty you are. Some cultures they look at these skinny women and go, you are sickly, you need something to eat. In other cultures, they look at people who are just normal and say, you should be skinnier. So everybody has their mark for beauty. In that era, it was the eyes. The way they described David in 1 Samuel 15, verse 12, it says, so he sent and brought him in. So they're bringing all the sons of Jesse in. It says, now he was ruddy with bright eyes and good looking. And the Lord said, arise, anoint him, for this is the one. And they made sure they described he had bright eyes. So Leah's eyes were delicate. So she had something going on with her eyes. And in that culture, that meant she wasn't attractive for some reason. Okay, so he was attracted to Rachel. But Rachel was beautiful, it says, of form and appearance. Now back to Genesis 29, verse 18. Now Jacob loved Rachel. So he said, I will serve you for 7 years for Rachel, your younger daughter. And Laban said, it is better that I give her to you than I should give her to another man. So yes, I will accept. No, he didn't say that. He says, stay with me. He never said yes or no. He didn't say yes or no. He didn't say, yes, I will give you my daughter. You can. He just said, well, if I had my choice, it'd be better than you to give you somebody else. Stay with me. That's all he says. He leaves himself wiggle room. So he can say, I never said, because he didn't. Because you talk about making a deal. So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed only a few days to him because of the love he had for her. So I'm going to end there because we're going to talk about what happens next to Jacob, the deal maker, when he runs into somebody who really knows how to make a deal, and why God let this happen, because he's trying to break Jacob of this whole deal thing. Like, you want to make a deal? Okay, let me show you what it's really like, and so that you would totally understand you don't have to make a deal with God. You could just trust me. You can, but that's going to take a while. It's going to take 20 years for Jacob to learn this lesson. So we're ending there. Thank you so much again for tuning in. And I'm sorry that my video stopped, and I hope some of you found me again. Next week, I'll actually be teaching at 9 a.m. Next week, I'll be teaching at 9 a.m. And if you don't want to get to bed early, it'll be, well, as you know, you can just watch it anytime. You can, so once it's over, or you can just rewind it. So, but for those of you who want to watch it live, it'll be on at 9 a.m. next week, because we are opening up our church, and our church service will start at 10:45 at Good Shepherd. And, but do stay tuned, because for sure, this time this time for sure. Watch me put a rabbit out of my hat. So this Carlos Davis is going to be on our regular Good Shepherd Facebook page, and then you can also watch that on YouTube later, and or go to our website. And we welcome all of you back. Those of you who want to come. If you don't want to come next week, 10:45 a.m., you can. The whole thing will be at 11 o'clock. It will be on our Facebook page. So you can either watch the service in person or you can watch it at 11 o'clock. I mean, we're opening the doors at 10:45, so please come at 10:45 because we got to put thermometers in you and all that stuff. And at 11 o'clock, the service will start for sure. Okay, so thank you for tuning in. I'll be there at 9 a.m. and see some of you at Good Shepherd at 10:45. And for the rest of you, I'll see you on Wednesday at Bible study. It's good. Jesus has just given the Passover meal, and he's about to go out and to be betrayed. So thank you, and I'll see you soon in life.